My name is Horacio Esteban. I'm an artist. Okay, so I was born in Cuba, and my mom was a British subject, and she discovered very early after I was born that she didn't want me growing up in a communist republic. And I think what did it for her was when Castro had individuals that were going around the community and testing kids to identify what fields they might have been best promoted in. Maybe it was a more clinical approach to developing society, whatever it was. My mother didn't think that there was so much democracy and freedom into that type of approach. So she said that was what did it for her. So moving home was her option. So when we moved to the Brock, it was in 1969. I was 4, almost 5, and there wasn't a whole lot to do. I had a lot of the ocean, I had a lot of the bush, so I found myself looking at things almost in a three-dimensional way, taking note of everything, the way insects move, the way birds flew, different kind of trees, and luckily enough, I grew up in a small community, so my elders knew a lot about plants and animals and survival techniques and how to fish and what type of bait to use. So this formulation of structure started early. And then I realized that because there was so little to do, I found myself creating with sticks and stones and figuring out how to make weapons to go hunt, just go get birds and stuff like that. So it came out of almost a necessity to stay sane as a kid and not get into trouble and just stay busy and top. So rather than going outward, I went inward, and that was when I think back now, it feels like I became an artist very early without even knowing it. You know, so here I am today because of it. I enjoy looking at other people's art a lot, and looking at other artists' work. But to be honest, the majority of my inspiration comes from basic observation of nature, life, people. That seems to be a big motivator for me. I don't have a specific one or group. I think all creative processes are stimulating to me. It's just amazing to see the way people think and to see that translated, in a two or a three-dimensional object, and realize that somebody actually, that was a conception of someone and how they managed to translate it from inside to outside. Um, Michelangelo is one of my purest artists though when it comes to stone sculpture, the things that he did. And I managed to visit one of the museums in Italy when I was there. So yeah, Michelangelo is a very prominent figure in my psyche as far as stone and the quality that can be achieved and the attention to detail. I don't strive for that type of realism, but it's amazing that him, managed to achieve that, and many others. I went to another exhibition in London last year, 2019, for Anthony Gromley, Anthony Gromley, who does these bronzes of his own body, and he has them all over London, all over the world. And he does this wire, sort of like entanglement of wiring in huge rooms, like rooms that would be the size of this entire gallery. And he has these wires that are running all over the place in huge cages that are suspended in the air. Amazing work. It's just, I'm fascinated by the creative process and my fellow humans. I think it's good. My favorite material, I would have to say, is stone because of its challenge in nature. and the way you almost have to utilize a form of X-ray vision to see inside the material, and then the patience that is required to extract your shape and forms, and having the ability to adjust as you progress within the process, because things happen. You might break off a piece a lot larger than you thought you were going to remove, so you have to adjust and go in a slightly different direction to try to achieve as near an objective to your goal as possible that you start out with. So I would say stone, but indigenous materials are very close to my heart. Doesn't matter what they are: sand, coral, uh, sea fans, gorgonians, wood. I think it's because of the way I'm wired, through a perspective of discovery, and try and challenging myself to use materials that are not normal working functioning materials. Um, it's also it stimulates a side of me that's sort of like dormant when it comes to being creative. So there's an internal stimulation as well with using materials that are not normal, you know. So and a big reason also is because they're free. I don't have to import them. Very seldom do I have to lay out money to create an inventory of these materials, because they're everywhere. And the identification process to identify what would work and what works better with this, and that's also a lot of fun and challenging. So I think that's the main reason. Definitely. For example, so I do a lot of work with cedar, but I don't cut down any live trees. I don't cut down any dead trees, because dead trees can actually act as homes for our indigenous woodpecker or local parrot, um, all kinds of stuff. Certain species of lizards will crawl in there and lay eggs. So I only collect material that has been sort of like discarded by nature, that is just lying around, and I also target materials that have uh, long sustainability, like a long shelf life, and also trying to be aware of materials that don't harbor bugs. For example, like cedar and mahogany, they're impervious to bugs. A lot of the sea fans and soft corals, they'll sit on the beach for years, 10, 15 years. There's places on the beach now where I've walked before Ivan and after Ivan, and the same pieces of material that I saw then are still there. They might be perhaps covered with new material, but they're still there. They're sustainable. They didn't rot. Nothing ate them. So that was where the observation, like, the stimulation coming from observation of nature and people. So I think it all links together for me. It depends on what I'm doing as far as music. If I'm sculpting stone, it's I won't hear the music. It might be on in the background, and as soon as my electrical tools or pneumatic tools go off, then the music sort of kicks in. So I do create to music, but not using music as a form of incentive or stimulant. My workshop space can get chaotic at times. I do a lot of my work outside because of the dangers associated with the dust element of my work. Um, for example, when I'm working with coral, the dust from carving and cutting coral has iodine in it, and it can sort of attack your nervous systems. Working with cedar, the dust from the material, it could be hazardous to your lungs. And the same goes with stone. Some materials are even toxic, to inhale. So most of my work is done outside under a tent or under a tree. Or working with a team was a lot of fun. When we first got together to try and decide how I was going to be, or the work was going to be best represented, and the theme of alchemy came up in this sort of like explorer's view and this sort of like journey. I was kind of skeptical because I'm so accustomed to seeing works just placed on the wall, and that's the work, that's it. It might be categorized in theme, but just still placed on a wall, not necessarily organized as a journey the way this one is. So that was, it was a little bit odd, and it took a few minutes for me to feel it, but because of the nature of my work, I have a tendency to adjust quickly or relinquish that particular power or control to something else or someone else, and that was the easiest way. I just had to sort of decide, you know what, these guys are the curatorial team. I'm just an artist. I'm gonna go with their vision, whatever that is. So it made it easy from that point on. They had free autonomy to kind of like do what they thought was best, and I just kind of like sat back and watched it come together. There were times when I walked in and it was like, who is this work for? Because I wasn't accustomed to seeing it displayed, you know, on these nice grand white walls and, you know, sort of separated with space in between each piece, and you could really grasp the energy and the essence of each individual one. So yeah, it came together quite nicely, and they were very accommodating. Okay, so a lot of my ideas, I'll carry them around for sometimes hours, weeks, months, years. For example, the cedar idea with utilizing cedar in this form, like how you would approach driftwood sculptures, I've been carrying forever. And it wasn't until maybe 3 years ago that I decided, okay, it's time. I'm going to really approach this wholeheartedly. A project that I'm working on now is also something that I've been carrying for a while. When I first discovered Caymanite as a material, I recall moving it out of the highlands oftentimes, and it would either drop or I would bounce up against something as I'm carrying it, and it would have this ring to it. And ever since hearing these rings come from Caymanite tonal sounds, it reminded me of what the sounds that a xylophone would make. So recently I've been trying to identify chords like G, A, B, C, D with the different ding dongs with Caymanite, and trying to create a musical instrument. And I'm really close to pulling that off. I just now have to learn how to play it and create, you know, like jingle bells, just start simple. but that is like my newest high from the creative process that I'm working on right now, is trying to finalize that.